Imagine you're at a casino. You walk up to the roulette table, place your chips on black, and watch as the wheel spins. The ball bounces, slows, and finally lands on black. You've just doubled your money. Was it skill? Did you have some special insight into the physics of roulette wheels, or was it simply luck? Now, imagine that instead of a casino, this is your business career. The stakes are higher, the game is more complex, but the question remains the same. Are your successes the result of skill, or are you simply being fooled by randomness? Welcome to CEO's Library, the 1% bookshelf where we dive into the most impactful books shaping industries and driving innovation. I'm your host, and today we're exploring a book that challenges everything you think you know about success in business and in life. It's called Fooled by Randomness by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. Taleb isn't your typical Wall Street guru. He's a former trader turned philosopher, a man who's spent his career studying the role of chance in our lives. And in Fooled by Randomness, he presents a provocative idea. What if much of what we attribute to skill in business is actually just dumb luck? Now, I know what you're thinking, but I've worked hard for my success. And I'm sure you have. But over the next 30 minutes, we're going to explore why hard work, while necessary, might not be sufficient to explain success. We'll delve into why our brains are wired to see patterns where none exist, why we're so bad at understanding probability, and why the most successful people might not be the most skilled, but the luckiest. So whether you're a CEO, an aspiring entrepreneur, or simply someone interested in understanding the hidden forces shaping our world, stick around. By the end of this episode, you'll never look at success the same way again. Let's dive in. Let's start with a story. In the late 1990s, there was a trader named John. John was good at his job, or at least he thought he was. Year after year, he made millions for his firm, buying and selling bonds. He had a big house, a nice car, and a reputation as one of the smartest guys on Wall Street. But then came the Russian financial crisis of 1998. Almost overnight, John lost everything. His trading strategies, which had worked so well for years, suddenly failed spectacularly. He was fired, his reputation in tatters. Now here's the question: was John skilled when he was making millions and then suddenly became unskilled? Or was he lucky for years until his luck ran out? This is the central argument of Taleb's book. He suggests that in many fields, especially finance and business, we dramatically underestimate the role of chance. We see a successful CEO and assume they must be a genius. We see a failing business and assume the leadership must be incompetent. But what if it's not that simple? Taleb argues that in complex, random environments like financial markets or the business world, it's incredibly difficult to distinguish between skill and luck in the short term. It's entirely possible for someone to be successful for years based purely on chance. Think about it this way. If you flip a coin 10 times and get heads each time, you might start to think you have a special coin flipping skill. You might even write a book about your coin flipping strategy. But in reality, if enough people flip coins enough times, someone will get 10 heads in a row purely by chance. The same principle applies in business. In any given year, some businesses will succeed and some will fail. If enough businesses operate for enough time, a few will have long streaks of success due to nothing more than chance. This doesn't mean that skill doesn't matter at all. Of course it does. But Taleb's point is that we often underestimate the role of randomness and overestimate the role of skill. Now take a moment and think about your own career. Think about your successes and your failures. How much of it was due to your own actions, and how much might have been due to factors outside your control? It's not an easy question to answer, is it? This idea can be unsettling. We like to think we're in control of our destinies, but understanding the role of randomness can actually be liberating. It can help us be more humble in success and more resilient in failure. And as we'll see later in the episode, it can also help us make better decisions in the face of uncertainty. Now that we've talked about the role of randomness in success, let's dive into why we're so bad at recognizing it. This brings us to what Taleb calls the narrative fallacy. Humans are storytelling creatures. We love narratives. We crave explanations. When something happens, we want to know why. This instinct served us well when we were evolving on the savannah. If your friend got eaten by a lion, it was useful to create a story about why that happened so you could avoid the same fate. But in our complex modern world, this instinct can lead us astray. We create simple stories to explain complex random events, especially after the fact. And let me give you an example. Cast your mind back to 2008 during the global financial crisis. Lehman Brothers, one of the largest investment banks in the world, collapsed. Now, after the fact, you can find countless articles and books explaining exactly why this happened. They point to specific decisions made by Lehman's leadership, to particular market conditions, to certain government policies. And some of these explanations probably have some truth to them. But here's the thing. If you had asked these same experts a week before Lehman's collapse to predict what was about to happen, most of them wouldn't have had a clue. This is the narrative fallacy in action. We take a random complex event and create a simple, satisfying story to explain it. We do this all the time in business. A company succeeds and we say it's because of the CEO's brilliant strategy. A product fails and we point to poor marketing. The stock market goes up and analysts come up with reasons why it was inevitable. But often, these narratives are created after the fact. They give us the illusion of understanding, but they can blind us to the true complexity and randomness of events. This doesn't mean we should never try to explain things. Analysis and learning from the past are important, but Taleb encourages us to be skeptical of overly simple explanations for complex events. So the next time you read a business case study that explains a company's success or failure, ask yourself, is this a genuine insight or is it a story we've created to make sense of random events? Could the same decisions have led to a different outcome in slightly different circumstances? By being aware of the narrative fallacy, we can resist the temptation to create overly simplistic stories. We can embrace the complexity and uncertainty of the business world. And paradoxically, by acknowledging how much we don't know, we can make better decisions. Let's move on to another crucial concept in Taleb's book, survivorship bias. This is a logical error that can lead us to significantly overestimate our chances of success and underestimate risks. Here's how it works. When we look at successful people or businesses, we're only seeing the survivors. We don't see all the people or businesses that tried and failed. This can lead us to draw faulty conclusions about what it takes to succeed. Let me illustrate this with a story. During World War II, the American military was trying to figure out how to reduce the number of planes being shot down over Europe. They examined the planes that returned from missions, noting where they had taken the most damage, and planned to reinforce these areas. But a statistician named Abraham Wald pointed out a crucial flaw in this thinking. The military was only looking at the planes that survived. The areas where these planes were damaged showed where a plane could take a hit and still return home. Wald realized that the areas without damage on the returning planes were likely the most vital. A hit in these areas would cause the plane to crash. The planes with damage in these crucial areas never made it back to be studied. This is survivorship bias in action, and it's incredibly common in business. Now think about all the stories we hear about successful entrepreneurs. We hear about the college dropouts who started billion-dollar companies in their garages. We hear about the risks they took that paid off big. And we think, if they can do it, so can I. But we don't hear about the thousands of other college dropouts who started businesses in their garages and failed. We don't hear about all the risks that didn't pay off. We only see the survivors. This bias can lead us to dramatically underestimate the risks of entrepreneurship or overestimate our chances of success. It can cause us to mistake luck for skill. Survivorship bias doesn't just apply to individuals. It affects how we view businesses and strategies too. We study successful companies and try to emulate their strategies, but we rarely study failed companies to see if they were doing the same things. For example, for every Amazon that succeeded with a get big fast strategy, there were dozens of dot-com companies in the late 90s that tried the same thing and went bankrupt. So, how can we guard against survivorship bias? First, we need to actively seek out information about failures, not just successes. If you're thinking about starting a business, don't just read about successful entrepreneurs, read about failed ones too. Second, when we see success, we should always ask, for each person or business that succeeded with this approach, how many tried and failed? This can give us a more realistic picture of our odds. Finally, we should be skeptical of success stories that attribute everything to skill and ignore the role of luck. Remember, for every big risk that paid off, there may be many similar risks that led to failure. By being aware of survivorship bias, we can make more clear-eyed assessments of risk and opportunity. We can learn not just from success, but from failure too. And we can avoid being fooled by randomness masquerading as skill. Now we come to perhaps Taleb's most famous idea, the black swan theory. This concept became so popular that Taleb wrote an entire book about it after Fooled by Randomness. But the seed of the idea is here, and it's crucial to understanding how randomness affects our world. First, let's explain what a black swan is. Imagine you're a European in the 16th century. You've seen thousands of swans in your life, and every single one has been white. You might reasonably conclude that all swans are white, but then explorers discover Australia, and with it, black swans. Your whole understanding of swans is turned upside down by this highly improbable event. In Taleb's terminology, a black swan event has three characteristics. 1. It is an outlier outside the realm of regular expectations. 2. It carries an extreme impact. 3. Despite its outlier status, human nature makes us concoct explanations for its occurrence after the fact, making it explainable and predictable. In the business world, black swan events can be game changers. The internet was a black swan. So was the 2008 financial crisis. The COVID-19 pandemic is a textbook example of a black swan event. These events are, by definition, unpredictable, but they shape our world far more than the regular day-to-day events we can predict. Let's take the example of Blockbuster Video. For years, their business model was highly successful. They could have made reasonable predictions about how many stores they'd open next year, how their revenue might grow, how the DVD market might evolve. But then came a black swan, Netflix. The idea of streaming movies over the internet was outside the realm of regular expectations for the video rental business. It had an extreme impact, essentially destroying Blockbuster's business model, and after the fact everyone had explanations for why it was inevitable. The existence of black swans has profound implications for how we think about business and risk. First, it suggests that the most significant events in business and economics are, by their nature, unpredictable. This means we need to be skeptical of experts who claim to be able to forecast the future accurately. Second, it means that we need to build robustness to negative black swans and positioning to take advantage of positive ones. In other words, we need to create businesses and strategies that can survive extreme, unexpected events and potentially benefit from them. For example, a company might maintain higher cash reserves than seem necessary to ensure it can weather unexpected crises. Or it might invest in a variety of small experimental projects, knowing that while most may fail, one might turn into a positive black swan that transforms the business. Third, the black swan theory suggests that we should focus less on trying to predict specific events and more on building general resilience and adaptability. So how can you apply this in your business or career? Start by asking yourself, what assumptions am I making about my industry or market? What would happen if these assumptions were suddenly proven wrong? How can I position myself to survive negative surprises and benefit from positive ones? Remember, the most significant events in your business career may be things you can't currently imagine. By embracing this uncertainty rather than denying it, you can create strategies that are truly robust in the face of randomness. Now that we've explored these big ideas from Fooled by Randomness, let's talk about how we can apply them in our professional lives, because understanding randomness isn't just an intellectual exercise, it can fundamentally change how we approach business and decision-making. First, let's talk about how understanding randomness can improve our decision-making. One of the key insights from Taleb's work is that we need to focus more on the consequences of our decisions than on their probability. For example, let's say you're considering a new business venture. Traditional decision-making might involve estimating the probability of success and the potential payoff, but Taleb would encourage us to think differently. Instead of trying to predict the unpredictable, ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen if this fails? Can I survive that? And if it succeeds, how big could the payoff be? This approach acknowledges that we can't accurately predict probabilities in complex systems. Instead, it focuses on creating asymmetric risks, situations where the potential upside far outweighs the downside. Another practical application is in how we view success and failure. Understanding randomness should make us more humble in success and more resilient in failure. If you have a great quarter or year, resist the urge to attribute it all to your brilliant strategy. Similarly, if you face setbacks, don't assume it's all due to your failings. This mental approach can help you stay level-headed and make better decisions over the long term. Now, let's talk about some specific strategies for managing risk and uncertainty in business. 1. Diversification. This is a classic strategy, but it's classic for a reason. By spreading your risks, you reduce your exposure to any single black swan event. 2. Optionality. This means positioning yourself to take advantage of positive, unforeseen circumstances while limiting your downside. In practice, this might mean maintaining cash reserves or investing in small, experimental projects that could pay off big. 3. Robustness over optimization. Instead of trying to build the perfect strategy based on predictions of the future, focus on building strategies that can withstand a range of possible futures. 4. Skin in the game. Taleb emphasizes the importance of having skin in the game, of being exposed to the downside of your decisions. This aligns incentives and often leads to better decision-making. 5. Via negativa. Sometimes the best way to deal with uncertainty is by removing things, reducing complexity, eliminating unnecessary risks, cutting out harmful practices. Lastly, let's talk about embracing probabilistic thinking. This doesn't mean you need to become a statistician. Rather, it means cultivating a mindset that's comfortable with uncertainty and probabilities. In practice, this might mean thinking in terms of scenarios rather than point predictions, regularly challenging your own assumptions, being willing to change your mind in the face of new evidence, focusing on processes rather than outcomes. Remember, the goal isn't to eliminate randomness. That's impossible. The goal is to put yourself in a position where you can survive negative random events and benefit from positive ones. By embracing these ideas, you can create a more robust approach to business, one that acknowledges the fundamental uncertainty of the world we operate in. And paradoxically, by embracing randomness rather than trying to eliminate it, you may find yourself better equipped to navigate the unpredictable waters of the business world. As we wrap up our exploration of Fooled by Randomness, let's recap the key insights we've discussed. 1. We often mistake luck for skill, especially in fields with a high degree of randomness like business and finance. 2. Our brains are wired to create simple narratives to explain complex random events, the narrative fallacy. 3. Survivorship bias can lead us to dramatically underestimate risks and overestimate our chances of success. 4. Black swan events, unpredictable high-impact occurrences, shape our world more than we realize. 5. Instead of trying to predict the unpredictable, we should focus on building resilience and positioning ourselves to benefit from positive surprises. Now, I want to challenge you to apply these concepts in your professional life. The next time you're faced with a major decision, try to identify where randomness might play a role. Are you perhaps being too confident in your ability to predict outcomes? Are you focusing too much on successes and ignoring failures? Are you prepared for unexpected high-impact events? Remember, acknowledging the role of randomness doesn't mean giving up on skill or hard work. Rather, it means approaching your work with a more nuanced, realistic understanding of how the world operates. Taleb's ideas can be unsettling. They challenge our desire for control and our belief in meritocracy, but they can also be incredibly liberating. By embracing uncertainty, we can free ourselves from the impossible task of trying to predict and control everything. We can focus instead on building resilience, creating optionality, and positioning ourselves to benefit from the unexpected. In a world that's increasingly complex and interconnected, where black swan events seem to be occurring with increasing frequency, these ideas aren't just interesting philosophical concepts, they're essential tools for navigating our professional lives. So I encourage you to dig deeper into these ideas. Read Fooled by Randomness for yourself. You'll find it's not only insightful, but also surprisingly entertaining. Taleb has a witty, irreverent style that makes complex ideas accessible and enjoyable. And speaking of which, if you'd like to get your hands on a copy of Fooled by Randomness, you'll find a link to purchase the book or audiobook in this episode's description. It's a book that rewards multiple readings, and I guarantee you'll find new insights each time you return to it. Before we close, I want to leave you with one final thought from Taleb. The inability to predict outliers implies the inability to predict the course of history. In other words, the most important events in your life and career may be things you can't currently imagine. By embracing this uncertainty rather than fearing it, you open yourself up to incredible possibilities. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Fooled by Randomness. I hope you found it as thought-provoking and potentially life-changing as I have. Until next time, this is CEO's Library, the 1% bookshelf, reminding you that in the face of randomness, the best strategy might just be to keep learning, stay humble, and always be prepared for the unexpected. Take care and happy reading.